Right, good. We get started. This time in the beginner class, we're going to learn, well, a specific use of the very basic grammars, which was last time we learned blah, 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 des, blah, 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 janai des, blah, 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 desu ka, as a question at the end. So we just have a brief review, and we'll have a look at the examples, like how we use it in daily lives and in our culture, actually. Right, so last time we got started with the very basic, very important structure of Japanese, which is blah, blah, wa, blah, blah, des. Wa is pronounced like this, but it's written with ha in this grammar. For example, I am Japanese, this is a pen, my father is a designer. These kind of structure would be what's called thought like this way, and you replace words into Japanese and then put blah 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 desu. That's how it is. Watashi wa Nihonjin desu. I am Japanese. Kore wa pen desu. This is a pen. Otousan wa designer desu. My father is a designer. Like this. Well, today, for example, I am well, which can be what is it called? When we ask for like how are you or like stuff like that, and you need to let them know that you're well. And this kind of sentence, you say I'm well. You can also make use of this basic grammar, which is watashi wa genki desu. Genki is actually an adjective grammatically, and this can be explained a little bit deeper in later lesson. But today, let's have it as a phrasal verb. You know, I am well, I'm good, I'm feeling okay, I'm healthy, I'm energetic enough. In Japanese, that's watashi wa genki desu. Genki desu. And then just review what we learned. I am not well. How do we say this? Blah blah wa blah blah janai desu. That's the basic one. I, watashi, well, genki, and I am not genki. So it will be watashi wa genki desu. Instead of desu, you add janai on front of this, and then the sentence will mean I am not well. Watashi wa genki ja nai desu. And I hope you remember that there are several ways to say that I am not or blah blah is not blah blah, which is ja arimasen. Ja arimasen is slightly a little bit more formal than janai desu. And the last one, dewa arimasen, is a little bit more like written way of saying that something is not something. So in daily life, in daily conversations, we usually say, well, I'm not well. Watashi wa genki ja nai desu. Genki ja nai desu. And the one of the three basic grammars, the last one, blah 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 desu ka, as a question. So you are well as a sentence, and when you want to make a question, are you well? In English, you replace the subject and the verb. But in Japanese, it's very, very easy just to add ka at the end of the sentence, basically. So you are well. You in Japanese, anata. And well, genki. Anata wa genki desu. You are well. So if you want to ask, are you well? And then the whole sentences, just you don't have to worry about the, where to put or like placing or replacing the orders. You don't really have to worry, and you put ka. Well, extremely. I mean, you even that would make sense without putting ka. Like you just with a pitch, high pitch at the end. Anata wa genki desu. It could work. Grammatically, you have to put ka, especially in the polite ways, in the formal way, to say that, are you well? You're well. So you might have noticed that genki desu ka, or you might have heard somewhere that in the meaning of when you say that, oh, how are you? Like, hello, how are you? How are you? Literally would be different than are you well? But in Japanese way, well, when you meet someone, your friend or someone new, or your family, your friends, you say, how are you? Hello, how are you? In this case, we'll say literally, are you well? Are you well? Usually, we can say, how are you? But here we learn this basic sentence. So, あなたは元気ですか? That's the whole sentence, of the grammatical explanation. But usually, in most cases, Japanese has a tendency to skip subject, especially when it's totally clear that, I mean, it's about you. Like when you're, looking at the person's eyes and, asking like, genki desu ka? That would mean that, are you well? Including anata. Anata wa as well. So usually say, genki desu ka? That means, are you well? Which can be translated in the movies or in the anime, that can translate as, how are you? But literally, we're asking if they are well. Yes, no question. And there is a magical o, which is a very polite honorific word we usually put to just show respect. How are you, Mr. or how are you, Miss? Or it doesn't necessarily mean that, that formal, but we usually put polite o. So, how are you? Are you well? That's o genki desu ka? O genki desu ka? Well, so now you have learned the very basic structure, and now it's all about your vocabulary. So the construction is very simple. No, not the construction. Structure is very simple. And if you want to say, instead of I am well, if you want to say my family is well, and then you will learn family in Japanese. That's kazoku. Kazoku. And then the rest is the same. Watashi wa genki desu. I am well. And you replace it with a new vocabulary. Kazoku, my family, is well. Well, if you want to specifically mean that it's about my family, not talking about your family or his family, their family, and then you can say in Japanese, my, watashi no, but usually, I mean, we don't need to say that. So in our culture, we don't need to, all the time, you don't need to say that. So we just say kazoku wa genki desu, and then that would imply that that's my family that I'm talking about. So, well, family in Japanese, that's kazoku. So how about father, mother, grandfather, grandmother? Well, very formal way, or like very polite way to call your own father, that would be chichi. Chichi. And mother, in the same way, haha. It's not haha, it's not a laughing sound, it's haha. And you have to say elegantly, haha. But I have also written that the other way of saying, for example, when you call it casually about your father, like dad, my dad, that would be otou-san. Otou-san. Same way, my mom, or like, his mom, and then okaa-san. And this can be also applied when you ask the other people about their fathers, about their mothers, which wouldn't happen when you talk about your own fathers and mothers. So when you talk about your own, you will probably use chichi or haha. When you mean casual way of saying your father, or like when you're talking to your friends or something, you're very welcome to use otou-san when you talk about your father. But when you ask the other people, how is your father? Like what does your father do? You wouldn't use the word chichi. That would be very weird. It's just our culture that we have different terms. regarding in the situation or the people or the relationship, or if you're talking about your own or somebody else's. Right, the same way, grandfather in a very decent Japanese, that's sofu. Sofu. Grandmother, sobo. Sobo. And again, I have also written the casual ways, oji-san as grandfather. So when you talk about your own grandfather in a bit casual way or to your friends, you can say oji-san or even oji-chan, which makes it sound like you know, with the caring, I don't know, with the intimacy or with a very close of relationship. So maybe like smaller kids will call their own grandfather like oji-chan, or I would call my grandfather as oji-chan as well, and to him. Or when I talk about my grandfather to my friends, or when we talk about very casually. But when I talk about my grandfather to, for example, your professor or your boss or somebody you first met, or in a very polite situation, in a formal situation, I will call my grandfather as sofu, sofu, or in written Japanese as well. Right, the grandmother, that's sobo, and your own with a casual way, or when you ask the other people about their grandmother, you would use oba-san, or with a little bit more like charming way to call them, that's oba-chan, oba-chan. A little bit more of vocabulary in family members: older brother, younger brother, older sister, younger sister. Older brother, ani, ani. Younger brother, ototo, ototo. Well, I hope you remember this magical u. We write u, but pronunciation after to, the consonant to, like o column. The pronunciation will be oto-oto, ototo instead of otouto. And then it's about your own. So when you talk about the other people's, or when you call them with in the casual ways, oni-san or oni-chan. And then, well, this little brother, ototo-san, that's not something you call your own little brother. San as in if Mr. or Ms. or like that, the suffix, or like that's something you call the other people's family members with respect, right? So when you want to ask them about how is your brother, that would be ototo-san. You will use in the sentence. So it will be a bit weird or like a bit impolite when you say, how is your ototo? It's like, oh, it's not your own little brother. So it might give them a little bit like, oh, wait, what did you just call him? So when you want to ask the other people's little brother, that would be ototo-san. Right, again, the same way, older sister, ane. Your older sister in the conversation, one-san. Younger sister, imoto. Again, so u, written u pronunciation, or imoto, not imouto. And then when you talk about the other people's little sister, it will be imoto-san. Husband, when you talk about your own, otto, otto, not otto. Also as in the European name, but otto, very soft T, otto. But your husband, when you talk about the other people's husband, that would be goshujin, totally different. Goshujin, goshujin, goshujin. When you talk about your own wife, tsuma, tsuma. When you talk about the other people, when you want to ask them about their wives, okusan, your wife in the conversation, when you want to ask their wife, that's okusan. Good. Child or children. Oh, we don't need to distinguish the plural or singular here. Not necessarily. child or children about your own. 子供 somebody else's. The ones you were talking to, that would be お子さん not お姉さん in hiragana. Well, if you didn't care about the hiragana, it could have been no problem, but there is a problem here. Right, anyway, お子さん is called お子さん. So finally, we just have a look at the how it's actually how it will be as in a conversation. So in the conversation that you want to ask, is your father well? Like, how is your father? And you want to ask, like, you want to answer that, yeah, yes, thank you, he is well. My father is well. What would it be? So, is your father well? As a question, so you have to have ka at the end and blah, blah, blah. Your father. So, it's お父さん. お父さん. And wa. And then you will be very appreciated when you put お in front of 元気. And です. Blah, 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 blah. です that structure plus か at the end. お父さんはお元気ですか? お父さんはお元気ですか? That's, is your father well? And when you want to mean yes, he's well. Yes, in Japanese, that's はい. はい. And we don't need to translate he as in literally, but you just repeat the word. But you have to change the way of speech because now you're talking about your father, your own father. So you will be saying 父は元気です. And maybe you can notice that there is no お because it's a respect or it's an honorific or it's with a polite or. You don't talk when you talk about your own father. It'll be very weird if you say 父はお元気です. It's like, is he a king or something? So, I mean, normally your father is not king, so you don't have to have the very honorific o to your father. In this case, especially when you talk about your own family to the other people. Right. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. お疲れ様でした. If you want to practice Japanese with us and meet your new classmates, you're more than welcome to join us. Okaeri School.